right now, not tomorrow, not next week. Right now, it's time to move. It's time to stop talking, stop dreaming, and start doing. Because here's the truth: God has already equipped you with everything you need to succeed. He has set a purpose before you, but the clock is ticking. And the question is, will you get it done before your time runs out? Will you stand before him and say, I finished the race? Or will you stand in regret, realizing you could have done more? Today, we're not leaving this room the same. Today, we're going to make the decision to step into action in faith like never before. The power of now. God didn't create you to wait. Ecclesiastes 3:1 reminds us there is a time for everything, but that time isn't indefinite. Procrastination isn't just a bad habit, it's a spiritual enemy. The moment you hesitate is the moment the enemy gains ground in your life. Faith without works is dead. James 2:17 challenges us: faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. You can pray all day for breakthrough, but if you're not putting in the work, you're wasting the gifts God has given you. Overcoming excuses. How often do we say, I'm too tired, I don't have enough time, or I'm not ready? Remember Moses, he told God he wasn't eloquent enough to lead, but God said, I will be with you, Exodus 3:12. If God is with you, what excuse can stand? God's purpose for you. Jeremiah 29:11 declares, for I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Your purpose isn't just for you, it's for the kingdom. Every delay in fulfilling it impacts more than just you. Persistence in action. Look at Noah. God told him to build an ark before there was any sign of rain. People laughed at him, but Noah kept building. His obedience saved humanity. Your persistence could be the breakthrough someone else is waiting for. Accountability to God. The parable of the talents teaches us that God expects a return on what he's entrusted to us. Don't bury your talent because of fear or laziness.st, who strengthens me. That's your truth. Right now, God is saying, go. Get it done. No more delays, no more excuses, because the world doesn't need another dreamer. It needs a doer. So when you leave here today, I want you to walk out in boldness, in faith, and in purpose. And when you stand before God, may he say, well done, good and faithful servant. Let's get it done. Time waits for no one. We live in a world where everything moves fast, where opportunities come and go in the blink of an eye. Ecclesiastes 3:1 tells us there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. The key part of that verse is that time is not unlimited. We may have seasons of waiting, but the time to act is now. There is no guarantee that tomorrow will bring the chance you need. If you keep putting things off, the doors that God has opened for you may close. We often think we have all the time in the world, but that's a lie. Procrastination is a thief stealing your present and future. It convinces you that you can wait until everything is just right, until you feel more prepared, until the stars align, until the perfect moment comes. But the perfect moment isn't out there waiting for you. It's right now. And if you don't step into it, you might find yourself one day looking back, wishing you had acted sooner. You see, the time to act is not some far-off moment, some distant future. It's today. When you look at the world around you, everything that was once a dream, a thought, or a hope was brought to fruition by someone who took action in their moment. What's the point of all your prayers, your dreams, your faith, if you don't back them up with action? You can pray all day long, but if you don't step forward, if you don't get it done, you're missing the very essence of what God's calling you to do. God has already given you everything you need to succeed right now. In his timing, he's provided you with the tools, the strength, the purpose, but he will not do it for you. You must act. Time is ticking, and the moment to move is here. Will you step up? Will you stop waiting for everything to be perfect? Or will you take the next step in faith and trust that God will meet you in that moment? We often say we'll get it done tomorrow, but God is saying today is the day. Today is the time to get it done. Today is your season. The urgency isn't about rushing without purpose. It's about realizing that there's no time like the present to begin fulfilling your purpose. The moment to step out of faith is now, and you cannot afford to waste another minute. Your time is now. What are you going to do with it? Faith without works is dead. You've heard it before, but let me ask you, what does that mean to you? James 2:17 says, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Think about that. You can believe all you want. You can have dreams as big as the stars, but if you're not willing to take action, what's the point? Faith is not passive. It's not sitting back and waiting for God to hand you the life you're praying for. Faith is active, it's alive. It's rolling up your sleeves, stepping out, and putting in the work. God never said, sit still, and I'll do everything for you. He said, go. He said, move when Jesus told Peter to walk on water. He didn't promise Peter wouldn't feel the wind or see the waves. He just said, come. Peter had to step out of the boat. He had to take action, even though everything around screamed that it was impossible. Faith is trusting God enough to act, even when you can't see the whole picture. How many of us are sitting on dreams and calling it faith, but in reality, it's fear? We're saying, God, I trust you, but we're not taking the steps he's asking us to take. That's not faith, that's comfort. True faith requires you to step out into the unknown, to risk something, to move forward, even when you don't know how it's all going to work out. God doesn't bless intentions, he blesses actions. Some of us are waiting for God to move, but maybe God is waiting for us to move. Maybe he's already opened the door, but you're standing still waiting for him to push you through it. But he won't, because he gave you free will. He gave you the power to choose. He gave you the tools, the talents, and the calling. And now he's asking you to trust him enough to use them. So the question is, are you going to put in the work? Are you going to show God that you believe not just with your words, but with your actions? Or are you going to let fear, doubt, or laziness keep you stuck in the same place? Faith without action is like a seed that's never planted. It has potential, but it will never grow. You've got the faith, now it's time to show God you're ready to get it done. How often do we let excuses hold us back? I'm too tired, I don't have enough time, I'm not ready. These phrases may feel real, but they're just lies wrapped in comfort. Excuses are the chains we willingly put on ourselves, keeping us from the greatness God has called us to step into. But let me tell you something, God doesn't care about your excuses. He cares about your obedience. Think about Moses. When God called him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses immediately started listing excuses. I'm not a good speaker, they won't believe me, send someone else, but God didn't ask Moses if he felt ready. God said, I will be with you, Exodus 3:12. That was all Moses needed. And it's all you need too. Your readiness is not about how you feel, it's about who God is. We often use excuses as a shield to avoid stepping into the unknown. But when you hold on to excuses, you're telling God, I don't trust you enough to move forward. That's not what faith looks like. Faith looks like saying, I may not have all the answers, but I trust you, Lord, to provide what I need when I need it. Now, let's talk about another excuse. I don't have enough time, really. God gave you the same 24 hours he gave everyone else. The question isn't about time, it's about priorities. Are you willing to put God's purpose for your life above your comfort, your distractions, or your fear? Because when you make God's purpose your priority, he multiplies your efforts. He opens doors you couldn't open on your own. But it starts with you deciding to stop letting excuses win. You might say, I'm not ready. Let me remind you of this: God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. David wasn't a warrior when God called him to face Goliath. He was a shepherd. But David didn't make excuses. He didn't wait until he had armor or battle training. He stepped out in faith with what he had, and God did the rest. Excuses feel safe, but they will never lead you to victory. Today, it's time to recognize them for what they are: a barrier between you and God's best for your life. Break free from them. Trust that God will meet you in your action. Stop waiting, stop hesitating, and stop doubting. The only thing standing between you and your breakthrough is the excuse you've been holding on to. Let it go and get it done. God didn't create you without a purpose. Jeremiah 29:11 makes it clear, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. That's not just a nice sentiment, it's a promise. It's a declaration that your life has meaning, that God has crafted a divine purpose just for you. But here's the thing, that purpose isn't just for you. It's for his kingdom. It's for the people around you. It's for the world. And if you don't step into it, you're not just robbing yourself, you're robbing others of the blessings God intended to flow through you. You're not here by accident. Every gift you have, every talent, every opportunity was given to you for a reason. But gifts left unused don't glorify God. Imagine if Moses had ignored God's call to free the Israelites. Imagine if Esther hadn't stepped up to save her people. Imagine if Jesus himself had said, this is too much for me, the world would be a different place. And while your wrong may not seem as monumental, the truth is God has a plan for you that is uniquely yours. What's stopping you from stepping into that purpose? Is it fear? Doubt? Comparison? Let me remind you, this God didn't make a mistake when he called you. He knew exactly who he was choosing. He knew your strengths and your weaknesses. And he chose you anyway. When you say, I'm not enough, God says, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness, 2 Corinthians 12:9. When you say, I don't know what to do, God says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Proverbs 3:5. Your purpose isn't just about you feeling fulfilled. It's about obedience to God's will. It's about making an impact for his glory. When you align your actions with his purpose, you become a vessel for his power, his love, and his grace to flow through. But alignment requires movement. It requires saying yes to the call, even when you don't have all the answers. So ask yourself today, are you walking in God's purpose for your life, or are you holding back, waiting for the right time, the right circumstances, or the right feeling? The right time is now. God's plan doesn't operate on your convenience. It operates on his divine timing. And he's saying, it's time to get it done. Don't let fear or hesitation rob you of the destiny God has written for you. Step into his purpose and watch how he uses you to transform lives. When God gives you an assignment, he doesn't promise it will be easy, but he does promise that it will be worth it. The Bible is filled with stories of persistent people who trusted God and stayed the course, even when it didn't make sense. Think about Noah. God told him to build an ark, and there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. People laughed at him, mocked him, and called him foolish. Yet Noah kept building. He didn't let the opinions of others stop him because he trusted the one who gave him the task. His persistence wasn't just about building a boat. It was about obedience, faith, and the salvation of his family and humanity. The truth is, God's timing doesn't always align with ours. Sometimes it feels like we're working, but nothing is happening. That's when persistence becomes essential. Galatians 6:9 reminds us, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. That's a promise. Your persistence isn't wasted. It's preparing you for the harvest God has planned. But let's be real, sticking with it can be hard. The enemy wants you to quit. He wants you to believe that your efforts are in vain, that the work is too much, and that you're not making progress. That's why persistence requires faith. Faith that God is working behind the scenes, even when you can't see it. Faith that your labor in the Lord is not in vain, 1 Corinthians 15:58. You're not just working for yourself, you're working for something bigger. Your persistence is part of God's plan to shape you, to grow you, and to use you for his glory. Think about Joseph, who endured betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. He could have given up, but he stayed faithful to God's calling. And in the end, he rose to a position of power that allowed him to save his family and an entire nation. His persistence was the key to his purpose. Whatever God has called you to do, stay the course, even when it feels hard, even when it feels slow, even when it feels impossible. Keep going, because persistence isn't about immediate results. It's about trusting God's time and his plan. The ark wasn't built in a day. The walls of Jericho didn't fall on the first lap. And your breakthrough won't happen if you give up halfway. Keep building, keep marching, keep trusting. God's promise is on the other side of your persistence. Get it done. In life, there are moments when things seem impossible. The obstacles look too big. The challenge is too overwhelming. We've all faced situations that make us want to throw in the towel and give up. But here's the thing, God doesn't call us the easy paths. He calls us the paths where we need his strength, where we need to rely on him. And in those moments of doubt and struggle, we must remember the power of persistence. Look at the story of David and Goliath. When David, a young shepherd, stepped onto the battlefield to face the giant Goliath, it must have seemed like a suicide mission. Goliath was a warrior, towering above David in size and strength. But David didn't see an impossible situation. He saw an opportunity to demonstrate the power of God. He said, you come against me with a sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty One, Samuel 17:45. And with a single stone, David defeated the giant. David's victory wasn't just about the physical battle. It was about trusting in God's ability to overcome any obstacle. The power of persistence is that it relies on God, not our own strength. David didn't have the armor, the size, or the experience that Goliath had, but he had something greater. He had faith in the God who had delivered him in the past and would deliver him again. Persistence doesn't mean that you'll never face opposition or difficulty. It means that when the enemy rises up, you don't back down. You don't quit. You keep pushing forward, trusting that God will provide the strength and resources you need to overcome. When you face your Goliaths, whether they are financial struggles, relationship issues, or personal doubts, remember that God is greater. He has never lost a battle, and he's not about to start now. The key to persistence is to keep your focus on God, not the size of the giant. Remember that no obstacle is too great for God to handle. You may be facing challenges that seem insurmountable, but with God on your side, there is nothing you cannot conquer. Just as David faced down Goliath, you can face down whatever's standing in your way. Persistence is about knowing who you are in Christ. It's about believing that the power of the Holy Spirit is greater than any fear or doubt. Philippians 4:13 tells us, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And that's the truth you need to hold on to when everything around you seems impossible. It's not your strength, it's his. And with that power, you can stand firm, face your giants, and get it done. Keep going, because the victory is already yours through Christ. When God calls you to do something, he doesn't leave you to do it on your own. As believers, we are stewards not only of our time and talents, but of the assignments God gives us. And with that responsibility comes accountability. Jesus made it clear in the parable of the talents, Matthew 25:14-30, that we are entrusted with certain gifts, and one day we will give an account for how we use them. The master in the parable didn't praise the servant who buried his talent in fear. He condemned him. Why? Because that servant didn't do anything with what he had been given. He didn't take action, and he didn't use his gifts for the master's purpose. We often forget that our time, our abilities, our very lives are not our own. They belong to God. And as stewards, we must manage them wisely, using them to fulfill his will. That means we don't have the luxury of wasting time or letting fear keep us from stepping out. We are accountable to God for how we use the gifts he's entrusted to us. We often say things like, I'll do it later, or I'm not good enough, or someone else can do it better. But what if that someone else is you? God doesn't call the perfect, he calls the willing. It's not about being the best, it's about being faithful with what you have. God is looking for people who will take what they've been given and invest it, not bury it. He's looking for people who will act, who will step forward, even when they don't feel ready. God has given you the time, the talents, and the opportunities to fulfill his purpose. But one day he will ask, what did you do with what I gave you? Will you be able to say, I used everything I had to fulfill your purpose? Or will you stand before him empty-handed because you were too afraid to act, too comfortable in your own fears, too lazy to move? Here's the truth. Every moment you delay is a moment you'll never get back. You don't have time to waste. God is calling you to be a faithful steward of what he's given you. That means taking action. It means moving forward, even when it's hard, even when you don't have all the answers. God doesn't expect you to be perfect. He expects you to be obedient. And when you take action, he will give you the strength, the wisdom, and the resources you need to accomplish what he's called you to do. So let's get this clear. You are accountable to God. The talents, the time, the opportunities you've been given are not to be buried or wasted. They are meant to be used for his glory. You are not just working for your own success, you are working for the kingdom. And when you stand before God, may he say, well done, good and faithful servant. It's time to step up, take accountability, and get it done. There's a danger in waiting for everything to be perfect before you take action. We often find ourselves paralyzed by the need for the right circumstances, the right timing, or the right resources. But the truth is, perfection is an illusion. Waiting for everything to line up perfectly before you move forward can keep you stuck in a state of inaction. And that's exactly where the enemy wants you. He wants you to doubt yourself, question your calling, and hold back. But God doesn't require perfection, he requires obedience. In the Bible, there are countless examples of imperfect people stepping into God's will despite their flaws. Look at Gideon. When God called him to lead the Israelites to victory, Gideon's first response was to question God's plan. But Lord, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest, and I am the least in my family, Judges 6:15. Gideon didn't feel qualified. He didn't feel ready. But God's response wasn't, wait until you get stronger or more prepared. Instead, God told him, go in the strength you have, Judges 6:14. Gideon's victory wasn't about being perfect. It was about obeying God and stepping out in faith. The same principle applies to you today. You don't need to wait until you have it all figured out. You don't need to wait until the fear is gone. You don't need to wait for the perfect conditions. Obey God now and move forward with what you have. It's in the stepping out that God meets you. It's in the action that he begins to equip you. When you start moving, he will start moving with you. We often look at the obstacles in front of us and say, I can't do this, but remember, when God calls you, he doesn't look at your weaknesses, he looks at your willingness. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul writes, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness. God isn't waiting for you to be perfect, he's waiting for you to be willing. Your imperfections don't disqualify you, they make room for God's power to be demonstrated in life. So stop waiting for perfection. Stop waiting for the stars to align. Start where you are, with what you have, and trust that God will take care of the rest. You don't have to have all the answers, you just have to take the first step. It's time to stop making excuses and start making progress. You were made for more than sitting on the sidelines, waiting for the right time. The right time is now. The moment to step out in faith and trust God with your journey is today. Perfection isn't the goal, obedience is. Get it done now, and watch how God moves through your imperfect, willing heart. There will always be challenges, setbacks, and moments when everything seems like it's falling apart. Life isn't always easy, and pursuing your dreams and fulfilling your purpose won't always be a smooth ride. But here's the key, the obstacles you face are not signs that you should quit, they are opportunities for growth. It's in the struggle, the resistance, and the hard moments that your character is forged, your faith is strengthened, and your perseverance is tested. James 1:2-4 tells us, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. In other words, perseverance isn't just about getting through the hard times, it's about becoming who God has created you to be through those times. When you persevere, you are transformed, you are shaped, refined, and made stronger. Be done Luke 22:42. Jesus didn't want to face the cross, but he understood that through the pain, through the suffering, his purpose would be fulfilled. The same goes for us. We don't always want to face hardship, but often it is through hardship that God's greatest work in us is done. Perseverance doesn't mean pushing through without feeling pain. It means continuing despite the pain. It's about not allowing your circumstances to dictate your faith or your actions. It's about trusting that God is still at work, even when it seems like everything is falling apart. The moment you feel like giving up, that's the moment you must press on. The breakthrough is often just on the other side of struggle. You are more than the challenges you face. You are more than the failures, the setbacks, and the disappointments. You are a child of God, and he has given you the strength to persevere. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's not just a nice verse to memorize, it's a promise. You are not alone in your struggles. God has equipped you with everything you need to overcome, to keep moving forward, and to get it done.